Anxiety, depression, negative habits, they may seem permanent, they may seem insurmountable, but with the right solutions, we can find our way back to return to the center of calmness. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Center of Calmness. We are especially blessed tonight to be joined by Dr. Craig Springer, who hails from New Jersey. How are things in New Jersey right now, Dr. Springer?
Things are pretty good. We have great weather right now. Obviously, we're all dealing with the coronavirus, but other than that, things are as good as they can be, I guess.
Yeah, the corona seems to be hitting pretty much everywhere. Also, where I'm coming out from in Houston, we seem to have an upsurge in cases, which it's certainly affecting a lot of families, and it's super negative. But I guess it's just most important just to stay strong and work our way through it. How is the economy in Jersey? Is it severely affected, or are we able to come out of it?
It's been affected. Things are opening up as time goes on. Today, I think the governor announced that gyms are opening again, so that's a big step forward. Restaurants are still only open for outdoor seating. Indoor seating is still closed, and I'm not sure when that's going to change. But at the very least, some businesses have gone out of business, particularly restaurants and such. But the ones that are open are doing pretty well, I think, with the outdoor seating and deliveries and takeout. So we're seeing an uptick, in improvement in a lot of areas. Most of the bigger businesses are having employees work remotely, and that has worked out, I think, relatively well. And in some ways, actually, it's showing businesses that remote work is feasible, and productivity can be pretty good even with that. So I always try to look at things from a positive growth perspective as well. And I think that during this time of difficulties, we also have a lot of areas of growth. And with technology, right, technology companies are doing really well right now, and they're kind of pushing new technologies, increasing bandwidth and their abilities to kind of account for the number of people that are using online technologies right now. So I think that with any adversity, we have opportunity, and this notion of something called post-traumatic growth is really present, and that's the cool thing, right? So in my area, I'm seeing that everywhere, people are growing in various ways, and when we get through this, people will have skills that they didn't have before. And I think that's such a cool thing, right? That we can come out of adversity and thrive rather than just survive that.
Absolutely, yeah, it's completely awesome that we'll be able to adapt. Now, the process of adaptation and dealing with the current stress of the time is difficult, right? It seems the level of stress overall amongst pretty much anyone that I talk with, anyway, is more than it's ever been before. And that's where I feel that your practice is especially helpful, being that you focus on anxiety sufferers, depression sufferers, and I imagine that folks that have a tendency or potential issues in that area are really triggered at this time when there's an overall blanket of a high stress level just in society as a whole. Would you say that you've been seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been an uptick. I could tell you that my entire practice right now is via telehealth. Initially I saw a lot less people, coming for treatment. And this was like the first, month or two of the pandemic. I think that people thought that we would get through this. They can come back to in-person therapy and resume our previous way of life. And I think that, over time, people realized that this wasn't going to be such a short time and process. And, as time went on, they realized that they needed help and needed help now. And, I've definitely seen an uptick in the number of people that have requested services and are needing services, some directly impacted by COVID, and then some, maybe indirectly impacted, and maybe, they've delayed getting services because of COVID, for services they've even needed prior to, because they were in the process of going forward with that, with making the phone call or getting involved, and then COVID hit, right, and everything kind of got shaken up, and people were trying to navigate that. But it seems like at this point, people are getting very comfortable with what we have to do to kind of deal with the reality associated with COVID. And I could tell you that my existing patients adjusted quite well to telehealth, and I'm taking new clients on every day, and they find that in a lot of ways telehealth has considerable benefits, right? You don't have to commute to the therapist's office, right? You can do it, can work from the comfort of your own home in a safe place that you feel comfortable. There are some drawbacks as well, and one of those is that if you don't have a place that's private at home, that's definitely a difficulty that some people have. And I've even had people meet me from their cars to gain that privacy, which is not ideal in a lot of ways, right? Because it's not the most comfortable place to meet with a therapist. So, we've kind of worked it out. We've tried to figure out like what's going to work best for each person. And would there be some people that I would prefer to see in my office face to face in front of me? Yes. But I don't think that, I've made the conscious choice not to see people in person right now, because of the number of various things that I have to put in place to make that happen. A big part of it would be wearing masks, and such an important part of the dynamic and the relationship that you have with your clients is seeing each other,
Yes.
and seeing each other's facial expressions and body language, and so much would be missed by having masks covering your faces. The social distance aspect also has this practical and logistical difficulties associated with that, right? Not all of our offices are have the space to be 6 feet apart in a comfortable way. So that would be a limitation. And when you go to other places, you're usually not there for 45 to 90 minutes at a time, right? So the risk and viral loading could be pretty high, right, for that kind of extensive amounts of time that I see
True.
people. So for all of those reasons, I've chosen to stick with telehealth. Probably the most compelling one is research that's been done that has shown that telehealth can be as effective or almost as effective for most populations as in person. So why put people at risk, and engage with them in ways that feel so distant and not as those that are not as conducive to doing therapy, as opposed to being able to see each other face to face, interact with each other, albeit there's a screen in between. But in many cases, I think that people start to forget about that screen, and you start to develop that relationship that you so much crave when you want to have a therapeutic relationship with someone.
Absolutely. I wonder if we might back up for just a moment and just explore what motivated you to get into psychology in the first place, and to essentially work your way into the position now we're able to help so many, and even with the leveraging of the telehealth technology as well.
Right. So growing up, I experienced adversity myself, and there were times where there were multiple paths that I could take, and in retrospect, I realized that I was very fortunate to take a path that allowed me to pursue very positive things in life, but it could have very easily gone a different way. And part of it was the people that I got to meet along the way who were great mentors and source of inspiration. But I also think that there's this tremendous power of the mind, right? And we can make choices, and some of those choices have to do with our own thoughts, right? And kind of which thoughts we kind of go with and which thoughts we challenge. And as I kind of worked up and worked through my adolescence and young adulthood, I started to really become very captivated by the power of the mind, right? And I went to NYU undergraduate and took some amazing psychology classes and became even more fascinated, right? And I realized that this was something that first of all, I felt like I had the fortune of getting to this point, right? I was one of, in terms of my parents, my mom didn't go to college and my father didn't graduate from college. So, of my immediate family, I was the first one to really go through the entire college process. But, in addition to that, I felt like there were so many, fortunate decisions that I happened to have made, and I really was interested in understanding, how I got here. How did I make it to this place, as opposed to some other? But also, how do I help other people ensure that they kind of get to the places that they want to be too? And because I felt so fortunate to be where I was. And I started doing research actually in college, and I was actually doing research on parenting and figuring out, how parents can help their kids, and what kinds of parenting strategies were helpful and what weren't, you know, different outcomes as a result of that. And once again, this power of the mind and power of being able to do different things based on one action versus another action. And over time, I just got more and more into it. And probably by my sophomore, junior year of college, I decided that I really wanted to get my doctorate in psychology. And so once I graduated, I actually took a year and a half off, and I worked in a hospital-based setting, did some more research, actually on autism and Alzheimer's disease.
Wow.
And then I applied for graduate school, and I got into a few of them, and I decided to go to Fairleigh Dickinson University, where I got my doctorate. And throughout my training, feel like I grew and grew and grew in terms of my understanding of things. And then it didn't end there. Clearly, once I graduated and I started practicing independently, I learned more. And I think that I'm at a point now where I understand things in a very different way than I understood even when I was starting out postgraduate school. Because I thought that, I learned all these amazing techniques and all these things that I could do to help people. But what I didn't really realize was just throwing techniques at people are not going to help them. People need to be in a place to be ready for working on things, and their motivation has to be there. Right. And I could be as motivated as I want to be to help someone, but that doesn't mean that they're going to actually benefit from that help. And what I've come to realize is that when someone's not ready, I'm actually not helping them at all. And in fact, I could be standing in their way, because I could be standing in their way of them preparing themselves for that process by throwing techniques at them. They might be, so focused on rejecting the techniques because they're not wanting to change. And I don't mean that, they don't want to feel better. I think that they might not even realize what they're going to be losing if they get better. There's two types of motivation / resistance. One is process resistance, and that's what it's going to take to get there, right? It's going to be work. Unfortunately, we don't have a magic wand or magic button that we can press and make them better, right? So
Right.
they're going to have to work at that, and what's required to get there, is effort. It takes effort and takes willpower and desire, right? And it may not be worth it, for some people, or it may not be worth it at certain points in their life to get there, right? They have to be disciplined. And then there's outcome resistance. That's the whole idea that you might not really want the outcome. You might think you want the outcome. You might think you want to not be depressed. You might think you don't want anxiety. But depression and anxiety also give you some amazing benefits. And that might be hard to kind of grasp. So I'll give an example. For instance, someone might experience depression because they lost someone that they loved. And that sadness or depression allows them to remember that they have that memory of that person and not forget them. And they might not want to feel sad and depressed, but at the same time, they also don't want to lose that memory. And they might feel
Sure.
that if they give that up, they can lose that person, essentially, that they've been holding so deeply onto, right? So them not being able to eat well or sleep well or feeling sad a lot of the time is part of that memory. and giving that up might not be what they want at this moment. And they would have to come to terms with the fact that maybe there are other ways to remember that person, to memorialize that person, rather than them feeling so horrible inside. But we have to come to that realization. We have to come to terms with that, or we're going to fight tooth and nail. Whatever techniques you have, you might have the best techniques in the world. Those techniques are not going to be effective for you as a result.
The power of the mind in the other direction, I suppose, right? The defense
Yeah.
mechanism. I suppose a lot of those are actually subconscious, right?
They might be, and some of them might, you can actually talk about it in a conscious way too, that, and that's what I try to do up front before I actually start giving people techniques now. We have a discussion about that. We have a discussion about what are the benefits of the symptoms that you have, the emotions that you experience. What do they give you? What do they give you right now? And what do they say about you that's awesome and amazing? And once we do that, and this work is inspired by David Burns, who wrote the book Feeling Good. And, it's really powerful stuff because, if we don't acknowledge those things, that's where we fail. 9 out of 10 times we'll fail if we don't acknowledge that these things, there's a reason why someone has been holding on to these emotions or these difficult symptoms for quite some time. And we have to give ownership to that. It's not as simple as, I want to get rid of this. They might want to get rid of it, and they might be at a place ready to do it, but it's important to assess it and talk to them about it and make sure they know what they would be giving up. They might be giving up more than just the negative aspects of those symptoms.
I suppose so. At the same time, visiting the, as you said, the positive aspects of anxiety, depression are related. In a way, I would suppose helps to integrate the outcome of having that experience and to bring that into your core, and perhaps that is a key part of the process of reaching freedom of the symptoms of that. If you could take ownership of the outcome without having to experience all the negative aspects of being depressed, for example, or being anxious, I suppose that's quite a revelation there. I really appreciate that. So I wondered if
and also, and just to add to that, it may not be that you have to give up your depression completely, or not even depression, but your sadness completely. You can give up a lot of your sadness, but then maintain that small part of it that keeps you connected to whatever you're sad about. And so I think that's the other piece of it. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of thing.
Oh, okay. That's another distinction I really appreciate. So when patients go through your process, I wonder if you might highlight some of the most amazing results that you've seen through recent practice as folks come to you, especially in this very difficult time when a lot more of these feelings are coming to the surface.
Yeah, I think people start to almost have a sense of enlightenment. It's a sense that one of the big things that I talk to patients about, and that's from the cognitive therapy arena, is that our mind plays tricks on us. And, we have these distorted ways of looking at the world. And if we can identify these distorted ways and kind of talk back to our negative thoughts, it can really provide a tremendous amount of relief. And I could tell you that people feel such joy and pleasure in being able to utilize techniques to be able to dispel these maladaptive beliefs and thoughts that they have. And it's the coolest thing to watch them, right? And I do different exercises, and for one of them, the person actually has to respond to that thought by either acknowledging the accepting part of that thought, right? And that they find relief in that acceptance of it, right? Or being able to defend themselves, defend against that. And, because they'll evaluate the evidence, or they'll look at things and realize that they don't know what they're thinking that they know, right? So there's a whole list of cognitive distortions that we have, right? And
Right.
one of them is fortune telling. And like we think we know the future. We think we know that something's going to turn out negative when we have no clue. It's a crapshoot, right? It may turn out negative. It may turn out positive, but we're living our life as if we know these things for sure. And they create misery and tons of anxiety, right? So when we worry about the future going badly, we have anxiety. When we think about the past, right, in a negative way, when we start evaluating the past and we end up focusing on just the negative aspects of things, we feel tremendous sadness and grief, right? And so, people realizing that, they can't change the past and they don't know the future, just provides tremendous amounts of relief and allows them to really feel fulfilled again. The other thing that I do with people is I help them become more in touch with the present, right? Their present world and themselves, so that they're not as focused on the future or the past. And by helping them become more mindful and maybe engaging in practice of meditation or mindfulness or even deep breathing, it could be tremendous in terms of helping them to feel better as well, because the only thing we actually have control over is the present. We don't know what the future is going to bring, and we can't go back into the past. So if we can focus ourselves on what we have right now and on the gratitude that we feel for what we have, not what we don't have, but the gratitude that we feel for what we have. And even during coronavirus, I talk to people about this all the time. We are deprived right now. We're deprived of the things that we were accustomed to. We can't go to movie theaters. We can't go to, we can't sit down in restaurants if they're not open, right? We can't do some of the things that we used to be able to do. We can't go to the gym if it's not open, right? But the great thing is that we have these other things. We could telecommute for the people that can get to do that, right? That's saving ourselves, whatever amount of time that we would have spent commuting in our cars, right? We may be having more time with our families to spend and enjoy and get to know our families better than we ever have before. We may have a little bit of extra time to read or to do the things that we want to do, that, because our lives are not as crazy and not as busy in some aspects, right? If we have kids, they're not involved in a million different activities that they used to be, because those activities are not happening right now. So we could either focus on that, then add in a negative, or focus on the positive aspects of it. And I'm not suggesting that we only focus on the positive, but that we kind of look at it in a more balanced way, because we tend to not do that as much.
And bringing our thoughts in toward the present in the present moment, and having that gratitude for what we actually do still have, even though we perhaps have lost a lot of those activities that we fought so hard to get a hold of. That's huge. I've seen tremendous benefits in my own experience with that, being able to have more time with family and relate better, and actually develop, like you said before, additional skill sets, get into the tech and all the other aspects that we simply didn't have time for before. So
Right.
yeah, ending on that note of gratitude, I really appreciate, and I'm grateful that you had the time to join us today.
Oh, I'm really glad that you had me as well, and thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been so great talking to you.
Likewise, Dr. Springer. I wanted to flash up your information here real quick. This is Dr. Springer, and this is his website, the Good Life Center, New Jersey.com, goodlifecenternj.com. Thank you again, Dr. Springer, for joining us. And for the Center of Calmness, I'm DK Warner.